So whatever you were expecting coming into this weekend, really the core of what we're here to practice these next few days is love. And we might have some ideas of what that is, and we might be interested in practicing that more. We might not be interested in practicing that more. Maybe you hear that and think, actually, I'd just like to come here to relax a little bit, which is reasonable. The love that I'm referring to and the love that we'll be practicing is not the kind of love that we normally refer to in day-to-day speech. Neither like a familial love nor a romantic love. And the love that we're practicing is an unconditional kind of love and an inclusive kind of love and a dynamic kind of love that flows with whatever the circumstances bring. And so it doesn't always feel like warm fuzzies. Warm fuzzies are great, and maybe we'll be practicing some of that this weekend too. But part of what we're practicing this weekend is just relaxing. In fact, that's a first step. It's a precursor, and it's its own form of love. This kind of love that we're speaking about is also fierce at times. Could be a shout to tell somebody to stop doing something that's harmful, or to speak up for yourself, or to make a really difficult decision that you know might hurt somebody else, if you know that it's the best thing ultimately. And pretty much all of you have done some amount of meditation practice, most of you with the DiabetesSangha, so I think you have a sense of what I'm referring to. This love, we can break it out and use different words to refer to kind of some of the different flavors. So we have loving kindness, we have compassion, we have sympathetic joy, and equanimity, peace. And I'd also like to add forgiveness in as maybe like a subset or a part of compassion practice. Our work this weekend is to lean into that love for ourselves, for each other, certainly, but really for our entire experience. And that includes diabetes. So, somebody mentioned last night, and I think there was a lot of nods of agreement, that they hate their diabetes. Very reasonable. This makes sense. Relatable. And in a sense, Peter and I aren't asking anybody to give that up. In fact, leaning into your dislike or your hatred of certain circumstances is an essential part of this. So this love that we're speaking about is actually inclusive of this dislike, of this difficulty, of this pain. So they don't need to be separate. The first step, as I mentioned, is relaxing. And sometimes that is what love looks like in a certain circumstance. So again, this is not, we have to practice feeling lovey-dovey the entire time. This is how can I do right by myself and my experience right now? And ultimately, it widens beyond just myself and my experience. How can I do right by this situation? That includes other people and other things. Always we're going to start with relaxation. Always. And part of the reason for that, there's many reasons for that, but part of the reason for that is that just the way that we think of other kinds of love. This practice that we're doing, these places that we want to abide in, inhabit, these parts of our mind that we want to allow to grow, they arise spontaneously. So it's up to us to create the conditions for them to arise, but not necessarily for us to push them to happen all the time. So we can light a little bit of a fire, and that's part of Peter's role and my role this weekend, is to help create the conditions for you to light this fire on your own. But at a certain point, we're not pushing this kind of love. I mean, I'm sure you all can relate. I'm sure there's something that at some point you've convinced yourself that you're going to love. And you said, I'm going to do it and I'm going to love it. And most likely it didn't work. Some of us have even done that in relationships before. Also been there. It doesn't actually work that well. You can kind of push it along, and I won't even say fake it. There's something real about that too. There's something honest. But when there's effort there, it's always going to fall away when you get exhausted. And so what we're tapping into is something that spontaneously arises, and it's part of your mind all the time. It's part of your experience, and it's always available to you. Even though most of the time we don't experience that, we don't feel that. There's a natural next question, which is why we're doing this. To some extent, I think that's for each of us to answer. So each of us has come here for a different reason. Some of us who were here last night, we shared some of those reasons into the silence with each other. And so you might reflect on how what we're practicing, loving kindness, which I actually prefer to call friendliness, compassion, forgiveness, joy for others' joy, and peace. How can these things impact or influence the reason that you came to show up? There's another answer of why we're doing this that I can give, and perhaps it gives you something to chew on. Maybe it makes sense and maybe it doesn't. We can discuss it more also in our group connections. That wasn't a gummy pun, by the way, to chew on. This other reason is that we have these habitual tendencies. We have certain habits of the mind that are constantly working. And you can refer to these in all sorts of different ways. In Western psychology, often we just call this our conditioning. This is the way that our life has set us up to respond in certain ways, and our physical circumstances, even before our own births, in our family of origin. They've created this setup, these habitual tendencies, this conditioning, that we tend to respond in very predictable ways and often somewhat unwholesome ways to our circumstances, ways that are not good for us or good for others around us. And as we start to develop this more spontaneous, relaxed form of love, we have the opportunity to let go of some of those things. And again, in Western psychology, you would call this like deconditioning, or the extinction of your habitual tendencies. Over the course of this weekend, and I'll talk more about this tonight, they will arise, and hopefully mostly they'll arise in your own mind as you're sitting there silently. They'll probably arise externally in some way, and hopefully we don't make too much of a mess for each other, but that will happen too. And as they do, we really have two options. We have the option to continue down the same pathway that we're used to. And again, that's going to happen Actually, probably the majority of times at first. We'll just keep going down this pathway. And as we develop more consistent awareness and more stable and settled love, peace, we can start to choose differently. You can feel the urge to have those reactions. You can feel it in your body. So we'll cultivate a lot of awareness of the body. You can feel the urge to act in ways that don't really help you very much. And you can let go of them kindly, gently, without creating another bad habit of saying something mean to yourself internally. That only happens when we come from this relaxed place, though. If we come with a tight mind, Peter and I were just talking about this the other day, you can tell. And maybe you all have had this experience where somebody is, forcing some kind of kindness or a niceness, and it feels uncomfortable. It doesn't feel genuine. It feels uneasy. We have one dear friend from the South here. I always think of the phrase "bless your heart" when I think of this. It's like, that sounds like such a nice thing, but it is like the greatest insult. It's a little bit like that. It's like, oh, truly kill someone with kindness. It's like, oh God, please don't, I'd rather die some other way. So we start from this relaxed place, first and foremost, before we do anything else. And we'll keep coming back to this in practice. Relaxing the body, relaxing the mind. And then we'll start to lean in a handful of different ways. We'll give you different tools to these forms of love. And there's a handful of different forms that we'll really be practicing. We'll lean most on loving kindness, which again, I prefer to call friendliness because it feels less high and mighty. It's also a better translation of the Pali or Sanskrit word that is being referred to. But we can also just call it love. It's a kind of sweetness. And every tradition has a form of this. Every religious tradition, every culture, this is a human experience. There is, in the Christian tradition, there's the Greek word agape. In Judaism, the word chesed, which is actually the word root of Hasidic. One town over, there's lots of Hasidic Jews you all might have seen. So that term Hasidic comes from this word chesed, which is love, a form of divine or unconditional love. And every other tradition has its own form. And they've existed for as long as humans have tried to do something good with their lives. Each of these different forms, and Peter and I, you don't have to remember all of this, but each of them has something to be wary of, something to be careful about as you're practicing. Because sometimes they come out in unwholesome ways because of our patterns, because of our conditioning over time. So with this friendliness or loving kindness, there's something that looks very similar, which is sentimentality. What does that mean, sentimentality? Really, this is when we actually do have some attachment to the outcome of something, or to somebody liking us, for example. So it's like, I love you, you like me too, right? That's the undertone that we might not say. Or I love you and I only want these things to happen between us or for you. So there's a kind of attachment to outcome there, which is very subtle often. We have to be very, very careful about this. This is one of the reasons that traditionally you would not try to start with practicing this friendliness or loving kindness towards a family member or towards a romantic partner, because there's too much attachment there. There's too much bound up in that. That can lead us towards sentimentality. There's nothing wrong with sentimentality. It's just not what we're practicing. It's good in and of itself. I'm a pretty sentimental guy myself. The opposite of this is hatred. We already spoke about hating diabetes, and there's other circumstances in our life that we might feel that way about. And so this opposite, we just have to be aware of. We don't need to push it away. There's a phrase in the Zen tradition: if you try to walk towards it, you go further away from it. And so just the same with this loving kindness, or, our relationship with the opposite. If we try to push those things away, it's actually just another form of dislike or hatred or aversion. So we just relax into, okay, right now there's hatred, there's dislike of this situation. For example, some of you might be disliking that you're sitting on a very hard rock right now, and you didn't expect that this would happen. So there could be aversion. That's okay. Just relax into it. Just relax into it. See what I did there again? It's all part of the practice. Can't do anything wrong. Just kidding. So this is loving kindness. With compassion, and we'll really often be practicing this actually more in the mode of forgiveness, but we will perhaps practice compassion in its own way too. I think Peter has a plan for that tomorrow night, which will be really sweet. The thing that is very similar to compassion that we can get confused with is pity. Feeling bad for other people. That is not what compassion is. That is not what we're practicing. That puts us at a different level than other people. It removes us from the situation. Real compassion is when we understand our own struggle and difficulty. And by understanding our own struggle and difficulty, we understand in some way everybody's struggle and difficulty. Maybe not the specifics of it, but we understand what it is to be in pain, to struggle. And all of us here, I invite you to just look around for a second. Everyone here has been through a lot. And I don't know the specifics of everyone's life, but we're all human beings. And you don't really end up here where we're sitting right now unless something has gone not ideally. I don't want to say something has gone wrong. Actually, something's gone very right. But some uncomfortable things have happened that have led you here. So pity is not where we're going for. Feeling bad for someone else is not it. And you have to be very careful about that. So again, you have to come first. Sometimes when we hear of somebody's difficulty or suffering, we immediately jump to like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, or we try to react right away out of what's coming up for us. And that is a form of reactivity or pity or problem solving. Somebody yesterday, I made this mistake. Somebody was talking about, I forget, I think they didn't have something. And I immediately was like, oh, how can we fix this problem? So that's not compassion. You start with relaxing. You start with settling into the experience, into the moment. Feeling it with somebody. Now, of course, in the moment, it doesn't always look like that, right? You're having a real life experience. You're not going to say, wait a second, I need to relax so I can just relate to you in a more wholesome way. So it's messy, and you figure it out the way that you need to. But coming from this relaxed place is critical. Otherwise, it's something else. It's not true compassion. It's not truly feeling with and seeing the humanity of another person. The opposite that I'm not too worried about for everyone here is cruelty. I don't think we have many cruel people here. I don't think we have any cruel people here. And I haven't seen a lot of cruel behaviors or habit patterns out of people here either. But I will say that this is always good to observe in ourselves. And I won't say too much about that, but this is always good to observe in ourselves because we can practice this in all sorts of ways. Uh, we practice it in how we treat the environment, how we treat animals or other beings, especially insects, which can look really scary and be scary. We were just speaking about difficult situations with insects earlier. Much more can be said. That's a talk in and of itself, so we won't go into that. But it's good to always witness in ourselves what is coming up when we're reacting to something. And sometimes cruelty is actually what comes up internally, a kind of retribution or almost like a revenge. And then we have sympathetic joy, or feeling happy with other people's happiness, which is lovely. And all of these things we might start by specifically feeling with one person. So Peter's feeling happy about something that happened. That's wholesome, and I feel happy too. That's natural because I have a lot of love for Peter. Ultimately, as we practice over the weekend, and maybe you'll feel this and maybe you won't, but we start to develop this in a much larger sense, not conditional or focused on just one person, but it's almost universal, and it's not even, you don't even have to imagine a specific person, you can just feel it. Some of you saw the forgiveness practice that we put out a few days ago. That's the exact same type of thing. We might start with thinking, I have to forgive myself or someone else for some action or behavior. But ultimately, it just becomes feeling forgiveness. And you can just become forgiveness. Or you can become joy for everything. Of course, it's much easier to feel joy when there's something in it for us. And so that's the one that we have to be careful of with sympathetic joy. That's not really joy. That's not really sympathetic joy. And again, nothing wrong with feeling happy that something good has happened for us. And we can even feel sympathetic joy for ourselves in a different way. But this is really an unconditional joy for anything wholesome. So it's a joy that, as long as what's happening is good for the person involved or the planet or whatever our object is, okay, that's wholesome. That is a sympathetic joy. And then envy is its opposite. Also just good to be aware of. And perhaps that's more common. Certainly it's more commonly accepted in our culture than, something like cruelty. I think we frown upon more, but envy might be more pervasive. We might allow it more in ourselves. And there's all sorts of ways that this can spring up. You can pay attention to your thoughts and the way that your body manifests this feeling of wanting something that somebody else has, but not just wanting it, wishing that you had it instead of them is really what envy is. And that often comes with feelings of deserving it more than another person, or etc. We've all been there. The last form of love is equanimity. And you might not think of that as love. That might feel a little bit more puzzling. It's like peace, or it's not an entire absence of feeling. It is pleasant in its own more subtle way, but it's kind of a non-reactivity. So why is that love? When we're really feeling equanimity, there is a sense that everything is perfect the way that it is. Everything is exactly as intended and doesn't need anything to be different. And that is the ultimate form of love. It doesn't need your good feeling to be put in. It doesn't even need your joy. It doesn't need anything. It is perfect as it is. Whether it feels good, whether it feels bad, whether you like it or don't. Just the way it is fine. That is equanimity. It's not the absence of feeling bad or of feeling good. Those might arise, feeling bad or feeling good. It is just a deeper sense that it is just fine the way that it is. It doesn't need any change, doesn't need any adjustment. This is very different, but at face value can look very similar to apathy, which is where we just don't give a shit. That's the one to be very careful about. When we frame equanimity as a form of love, as a form of so much love that it doesn't need anything, that it's perfect, you're much more protected from apathy. Sometimes people don't frame it that way, and so you have a sense of equanimity as that you're just completely chilled out and everything's fine, whatever. That sounds a little bit more like apathy to me. It's hard to care about the world, and so I'm just going to care less. It's hard to care about these situations, so I'm just going to care less. There's a way that you might feel that you don't care as much, which is true equanimity, which is that you're not as personally invested. You're not as attached. You don't need a certain outcome to happen for you to be fulfilled in your life. That you can let go of. And it takes a lot of time and practice to let go of these things. But we have to be very careful about the ways that we're shutting ourselves off. And you see this with some meditation traditions even, where the tradition will put equanimity kind of on an altar, and then you get people who have been around for a few years and they start looking like zombies. They don't really care about anything, and they're not that fun to be around. So it's important to have so much love and joy for life, and in a way an investment in life, an investment in the good in life especially, but without requiring it to be different. We might work or move towards it being different, but letting go of the outcome of it actually being different is critical. And it's the hardest out of all of these. Speaking of that, I'd love to just invite everybody, just for a second, to sit and listen and feel the sun. This has been around for so much longer than us. And God willing, it will continue to be around much longer after us. Nothing about it needs to change, but it is constantly changing. We don't need to control or steer the flow of this forest or of our own lives. The discomfort you're feeling will change shortly. We'll be up and moving. We can take a nice shower when we get back. We'll have a meal. So everything will change. But if you can get to the place that it doesn't need to change, you can appreciate so much more of what you have, which is so much. And so little. You get to let go of so many things that aren't really yours to hold on to. This weekend we can be like the forest. This is your birthright as a human being. To settle into these forms of loving relationship with reality. Both diabetes and beyond. We all be at peace today, tomorrow, and for every day going forward. All right. Okay, close our talk, close the meditation. Certainly, that must have bought us blood sugar time. It bought me blood sugar time. Cool. Shall we?
And it's 11:11.
Oh, make a wish.
Sometimes I make a wish and then sometimes I sacrifice.
Let's keep doing silence just until we reach the summit, which I'm guessing is what, 10 to 15 minutes?
Yeah.
And then we'll hang out, talk at the top and on the way down.